I'm super excited to launch the brand new Nock-On backstrap. This is a project that's been a passion of mine since I started coaching archery, because one of the biggest disconnects in archery is when people start shooting, they get a wrist strap release, they start utilizing their index finger, and it quickly evolves into freezing under the target or also developing buck fever or target panic. The new backstrap is an awesome release that allows you to safely draw back your bow, anchor properly, and then slowly squeeze the trigger until you deactivate the safety, and then work on a proper back tension style pull against the back wall until the release goes off with a total surprise shot. Now, one of the things that's going to set the backstrap apart from anything else like it on the market is that you also have the ability to set this release so that it still works just like a standard index activated release, whereas when you pull on the trigger, it's going to fire without adding that additional back tension. So this lets you convert one release over to the ultimate training aid or a standardized index activated release that most people have grown accustomed to. Now, the backstrap is super compact. I've licensed an amazing wrist strap that has great adjustment, utilizes a BOA system to where you can easily push the BOA, tighten it down onto your wrist to the comfort that you like, and to remove it, all you have to do is lift off on that BOA and slide your hand out of the release. The backstrap is super comfortable, super quiet, very compact, and is going to work for any archer. The way the backstrap works is you're going to put the strap onto your wrist and adjust it to the comfort that you want. With the open hook design, you're simply going to load the release onto your D-loop. You'll draw your bow back just as you always would with your finger off the trigger, anchor properly, squeeze the trigger, which deactivates the safety, and then you're going to continually pull back against your string until you get a perfect surprise. To reload the backstrap, all you have to do is squeeze your trigger and close the hook. Super simple. So once again, you're going to load the backstrap onto your D-loop, you'll draw your bow, anchor, acquire your peep sight, squeeze the trigger to deactivate the safety, and continue to pull back until you get a perfect surprise. If you're going to use the backstrap for the first time, I'd highly recommend utilizing either a shot trainer like we have at Nock-On, or even a long piece of D-loop cord. Some of the things that I'd like you to start with is simply doing the motions that I just did earlier of drawing back, anchoring where you would, squeezing the trigger, and then pulling till you get that surprise shot. Now, the way the backstrap works is this tension, which you can easily adjust, is going to need to be set to where it fires at about anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds over your bow's holding weight. So if you have a bow that's 70 pounds and you're shooting an 80% let off, then that means you're holding 14 pounds at full draw. Now, the backstrap should come out of the package set to approximately 19 to 20 pounds for activation. So keep in mind, if you are practicing with a shot trainer, the amount of tension that you're pulling against that string is going to actually be a little bit more than the tension that a compound bow will have at full draw. But what you want to do once you're comfortable with how the release works and you start to utilize it on your bow is you're going to want to make sure that when you squeeze the safety or squeeze the trigger so the safety's deactivated, you're going to want to make sure that the release isn't going off right away when that happens, and that you're actually able to continually pull on that back wall until the shot fires. So let me show you an example of how that would work. So I'm loaded onto my D loop, fingers off the safety or behind the trigger. I'll draw back, anchor properly, look through my peep sight, squeeze my trigger so that the safety is disengaged, and now I'll continually pull until my shot breaks. Now, to adjust this release, it's super simple. Opposite of the trigger side of the release, you have a small hole right here, which has a small set screw on the bottom side of the case that you'll need to slightly loosen so that now you can actually adjust your trigger tension. To adjust the trigger tension, you'll install the Allen wrench that you get with the release. To increase the amount of tension it takes to get this to fire, all you're going to do is turn this clockwise. Now, if you want to decrease the amount of tension it takes it to fire, you'll turn it counterclockwise. With the new backstrap design, the same spring internally is going to allow you to go anywhere from 9 up to 40 pounds. So there's quite a bit of adjustment, and what I'll tell you is a little bit goes a long way. So if you're feeling like that release went off just a little bit too soon, then maybe go ahead and give it a quarter turn. Lightly snug down the set screw and go ahead and make another shot. So I'll squeeze my trigger, load the jaw, and now I'll go through the same process. Hook it onto my D loop, fingers behind the trigger, draw back, anchor, acquire my peep, squeeze the trigger, continue to pull until my shot goes off. So you can see that time took me a little bit more to pull. Now, if you want to set up this release so that it works just like a standard index finger release, then all you need to do is go through the same steps, loosen your small set screw. You're then going to back out the tension screw to where it's about flush with the casing for most bows. Then you'll snug down the set screw, and now we're ready to shoot this release just like a standard wrist strap release or index finger release. Draw back with our finger behind the safety, anchor properly, peep once again. Now remember, now you've got it set to where when you pull the trigger, it's going to fire just like a standard index finger release. But what's important is utilize what you know is pull good on your back wall, trust that pin float, and just pull the trigger. Awesome. Now, some of the principles that are going to be important for you to understand with the backstrap is that what makes this release teach you the proper techniques of archery that's worked for the top level archers all across the world is that a dynamic pull and a continual pull against your back wall until you have a perfect surprise shot are the keys to being the most accurate you possibly can. So the principles for this release is to make you or allow you to trust that pin float while you're just continually pulling, and because your pull could vary from one shot to the next, that activation could happen at different times. You could be at full draw, drawing back, anchoring, looking through your peep, deactivating the safety and starting your pull, and it might go off in 2 seconds depending on the rate of your pull or how hard you're pulling, or it could go off in 3 to 4 seconds. But that concept of you having to continually work for that shot to give you that surprise release is really the key to being a top level archer. So some of the things that's important to keep in mind is what can make a release that's tension activated or utilizing back tension or pulling back against the back wall to activate your shot. What can make a variation in that technique is, again, if you're pulling against the wall harder one time than you did the next time, especially once you deactivate that trigger. So one of the things that I want you to think about is a term that I refer to while coaching as checking in. And this is a term that I talk about once you've pulled your bow back and it's stopped and you're pulling against what I call the back wall. So you can pull back and the bow can stop, and you can just be very lightly against that back wall, or you can be very hard against the back wall to where you're pulling almost as hard as you can. So the term checking in is what I teach people about pulling back till the bow stops, finding that anchor, and then just slightly pulling on that wall a little bit to know how hard am I actually pulling on the wall, because you can feel whether or not you're pulling super hard against that cam or whether you're right at the point to where it's easy, it's not going away from you, but you are against the wall. And if you check in and start to understand that pressure before you disengage the safety, then your pull through, it's going to be super repeatable, and also you're going to have a way more dynamic shot where your rhythm and your timing is a lot more in sync. One of the basic principles you really need to understand, even when shooting any wrist strap, is going to be, where do I properly anchor, or where do I make my shot feel right when I'm at full draw so that I'm super repeatable and it feels the same way all the time, and where I have good clearance for my string and my arrow so I get great arrow flight and repeatability on the target. So I'm going to talk to you about what I look for during the anchoring process, and also how to adjust the back strap so that you can do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and quickly readjust this to where I'm back to pulling against the wall the way that I did before I set this release up. So that I can show you how this works. So what you want to do is you're going to want to think of your hand to where when you relax it, just like in a pistol grip style position, just like this, you're going to want it in that position, but you're going to want to slightly turn it so that your index finger is pointing straight off the front of your face towards the end of the target, just like this. And obviously you'll curl your trigger finger. Now what I focus on is my index knuckle right here. I put my index knuckle right at the base of my earlobe. And what that allows is the string to sit on the side of the face and have free travel forward, giving you good arrow flight and repeatability down on the range. Now, if you're anchoring lower, where say your thumb is behind your neck like this, that system or your triangle at full draw is going to come down as that anchor position is low like that, and you're going to start to put the arrow down towards the bottom of your chin, which is kind of a dangerous place to be for repeatability. The way I like to coach people, again, is index finger right at the base of the earlobe, lightly on the side of your face, and your trigger finger is literally going to be right underneath your lip. Now this puts your arrow and also your peep height is going to be in a position that's going to be almost identical to if you shot a handheld release. This is important because, again, it puts that arrow in what I refer to as the safe zone of my face. So I'll give you a look here at full draw. I'll draw back so you can see
putting my index finger right at the base of my earlobe, tip of my nose on the string, I'm looking through my peep, all's good. But you can also see that my arrow is between my lip and my chin. Now if I anchor lower and back, now my arrow is down on my chin, so if I have any type of variation in my head position, I'm going to instantly be pushing on that arrow. So when it comes to anchor position as well as proper technique with the back strap, I would highly recommend index knuckle, base of the earlobe. That's also going to be important because it's going to put your elbow in a position to where you have the leverage to pull back. If you anchor lower and your elbow's low, it's much more difficult to pull back properly. You're more than likely going to want to pull down, or you're not going to have the ability to pull hard enough to get this shot to activate. So I'll give you one more look at proper anchor, elbow position, and this time, if you're trying this at home, think about tip of your elbow pulling directly back to something behind you until you get that activation. Drawing back. Index finger, base of the ear. Tip of the nose on the string. Deactivating my safety. And now I'm pulling against the back wall. Tip of the elbow going to the wall behind me until I get that perfect surprise. One of the things that's great about the back strap as well is how easily it is to adjust the length of the release. So you can see when I have mine in the place where I like it on my wrist and I put a little bit of tension on there, I want to be able to put my index finger right here in my center section of my knuckle. I want to be able to put that around that trigger so that I can deactivate it or pull it. Okay, so I've got the release in this position here. And to adjust the strap to fit your hand or your finger length properly, all you have to do is simply loosen the 2 screws that are right here at the knock-on base plate. And when you've loosened those, you now have the ability to take slack out of that cord or lengthen that cord even more if you need to. Now, one of the things that I would recommend is not getting in the habit of putting this trigger way out on the end of your index finger. The reason I believe in that is because your index finger is so sensitive and it really understands pressure probably better than any other finger on your hand. So when people shoot a wrist strap or an index activated release and they start just using the tip of their finger, your mind really understands any variation in that pressure, and it starts to relate where you're at on the target with the exact pressure you're putting on your release. Now, by adjusting it to where you get more of the middle part of your finger around that trigger, you're going to be able to trust your float a little bit more, get your finger around that trigger to deactivate the safety, and keep it in that same pistol grip position and pull through the shot. So once you've figured out the length that you need or that you prefer, then just make sure you firmly tighten down both screws that are down here on the knock-on base plate. Now again, if you're done shooting, you want to remove your wrist strap, all you have to do is lift up until you hear the click for that BOA. You'll be able to remove your hand right out of the release. Now if you're a left-handed shooter, you can easily switch the wrist strap over to where the trigger will be on the opposite side of the release for your left hand. All you need to do for that is simply loosen the 2 screws on the base plate so that you can completely remove the strap out of the base plate, simply take your backstrap head, rotate it 180 degrees, and feed it right back through the same way as it came out of the package. Firmly tighten down the 2 screws on the base plate, and you're all ready to go to be left-handed. Now what I'd like to do is give you a few little pointers at learning to properly shoot a tension-activated release like the backstrap, and also a couple quick little tips about some of the things that you should involve with your practice routine so that you can learn to shoot this properly and also have some of that comfort on the target. Now I'd encourage you to also look for a video on curing target panic with the knock-on releases on our YouTube channel to see instruction on how to go through a full course of overcoming target panic using our tension-activated releases. Now, one of the things that I always encourage my students to have is a shot trainer. Now, this is set up to where you have a small knot right here on the top of the shot trainer. And for me, while I'm practicing or I'm working on technique, especially with a new release, is I'll go ahead and utilize that top burn knot at the top of the shot trainer and just pretend that that's my pin that I'm acquiring to a target. So I'll load my release, pretend like I'm drawing back, anchor properly. I'm going to point that small little tip of the string in the center of the target. I'm going to take my safety off, and now I'm going to continue to pull until I get that surprise release. Now, utilizing something like this is a great way to encourage proper shot technique and trusting that float as you're pulling until that shot fires. If you're someone that struggles with target panic, or you struggle with freezing beneath the target and trying to lift and punch the release, now this backstrap is going to be the perfect cure for all that. One of the first steps that I would recommend is obviously a shot trainer, but also utilizing a large target like this. The smaller you try to make your target, or the tighter you try to aim, the more likely you are to be focused on the aiming rather than the activation or the dynamic pull, which you're now going to be doing with the backstrap. So I will take students, get a larger target just like this. Don't be afraid to stand close, and have something that's big enough to where any type of float that you have, you're still within the center of that mass, and you're able to just focus on the process that I've talked about of anchoring properly, staying in your peep sight, deactivating your trigger or your safety by pulling the trigger, and just trusting that float. And if you're someone that freezes under the target, just keep your finger off the safety, get in there, let it move around, understand that there's nothing in there that's going to be bad, and just allow that to happen. Take the travel out of your safety, and just trust that float, even if it's a lot, and just keep pulling and trust it until you get that shot. When you start to get that shot to go off and you don't know that it's going to happen, that's the first and perfect step to proper shooting technique. The backstrap is simply going to change the archery industry because it's going to take away, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems, which is a brand new archer going in, getting set up, getting a wrist strap release, and developing the habit of hitting the trigger with his index finger. This is going to allow you to have your release, your bow, your arrow, but also the confidence of being able to put your pin on the target, trust that you're a human, you're going to move around, you're going to have some float. All that float is great. What you need to do is just continue to be slow and smooth, pulling against that wall until you get the perfect surprise shot.